Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Hope everybody's doing okay. I'm gonna pop open my Canada Dry here. All the cool live stream. I'm all like people like to pop open like a beer or something at the beginning of a show. I don't really drink anymore, so I'm popping open my lemon lime seltzer. Here's to you. Anyway, after that scintillating beginning, welcome to the show, everybody. So, as usual, if you're joining me for this live and you're in the live chat and you have questions that you want me to answer or things you want me to respond to, or if you were planning on being generous with a super chat or something like that, I would ask you to please hold off until I get past my patron questions and then I can turn my full attention to the live chat. And we'll go from there. So if you have something that you want me to respond to in the live chat, just hang on to it for a little while, and I'll try to get through the patron questions because I always answer questions that were submitted by my Patreon patrons first. So let's get started. And look at this, huh? See, now you can see my face the whole time. Isn't that great? Anyway, first question, as usual, is from our pal, Some Random Geek, who says, Steve, I'm looking forward to your next Trek Actually video on does Star Trek actually glorify terrorism? I'm not sure what you're doing for your research on the terrorism side of it. I hope that you and I hope that your audience will watch this video by Bad Empanada. It is really enlightening on the history of the use of the word terrorism and terrorist. Amazingly, when Vera Zasulich was on trial for shooting the St. Petersburg governor in response to the brutalization of the Tsar's political opponents, she was asked why she threw down her gun instead of finishing the act. She said, I'm a terrorist, not a murderer. Not only was she acquitted, but all that was there gave her an applause. Yes, like the meme. The history of the word terrorist and terrorism is quite fascinating. It is mostly a delegitimizing tool by nation states who want to hold on to their monopoly on the legit use of violence to brand their opponents, whoever they are, as terrorists, like how a Viet Cong combatant attacking U.S. soldiers who invaded their country is labeled as a terrorist, yet the My Lai massacre, where 400 people died by U.S. soldiers, wasn't terrorism. Maybe it is patriotism. Or the U.S. drone striking a wedding, not terrorism. And yet when someone who was radicalized by said drone strikes attacks U.S. soldiers, they're labeled a terrorist, especially if they're brown and Muslim. And yet even suggesting that terrorism could be seen as a neutral thing is so beyond the pale for some liberals. I've been told I could never talk to someone again because I suggest folks watch the video. I'm looking forward to your video, but I do hope you bring in some of this leftist perspective. After all, I am a professional anarchist, and anarchist is uttered in the same breath as terrorist during these current events. I hope you see where I'm coming from. Oh, a question. Are atrocities worse if they are labeled as terrorist? Is a massacre of bombing less reprehensible if it is not terrorist? Is there an action or entity you would normally be okay with that you suddenly consider to be morally wrong based on whether it is or could be labeled as terrorism? I'm glad you remembered to ask a question in there at some point. I think you're right, and I think my Star Trek video will reflect the fact that terrorism is very much in the eye of the beholder. You know, it's a cliche at this point to say that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think actually that Star Trek has taken kind of that view of terrorism. I don't want to get ahead of myself or get too much into what I'm going to talk about in the video, but I think if you try, to the extent that Star Trek has a coherent opinion about terrorism, it's something along those lines. It is something to the effect of, well, sometimes it is justified, or sometimes it is condonable, and whether or not we consider a given action to be an act of terrorism as opposed to another kind of violence is very much dependent on your point of view and your particular position, whether you are the person or a member of the group being attacked, or whether you are the disadvantaged group that is striking back, or whatever. A lot depends, and it's very much in the eye of the beholder. So the video will reflect that, and will reflect that Star Trek has acknowledged that it's a very complicated issue. and that the acceptability of certain acts, whether we would call them terrorist or not, is extremely dependent on each given situation. Next up is a question from Carlisle the Cinephile. Hello, Steve. I just finished watching Avatar: The Last Airbender for the millionth time, and the final episode got me thinking about a trope that I find a little troubling in media. In the final episode, Aang is faced with a moral dilemma because everyone, even his own past lives, want him to kill Fire Lord Ozai in their upcoming confrontation. He's reluctant to do so because he was raised as a pacifist and only ever used violence to defend himself or others, and he never used lethal force before. He is eventually able to find a way to defeat the Fire Lord without taking his life, and the day is saved. But this whole situation got me thinking about a trope I've seen in fiction on many occasions. I've noticed a lot in stories that heroes have no problem mowing their way through the minions of the big evil guy, but when it comes time to actually confront them, suddenly they have a problem with killing them. Why do you think this is? Why are so many heroes okay with butchering the faceless goons who are guilty of far less heinous crimes than the people they serve, but are reluctant to kill the people who actually committed those crimes? Is this the product of writers who don't think about the implications of what they write? I think in a lot of ways it is. Yeah, I do think a lot of these things are due not so much to conscious intentions of the writers. It's a trope that writers relied upon because they wanted the story to have a certain amount of action, but they also wanted the story to lead up to the kind of moral dilemma that you're describing, and they just didn't really consider the moral ramifications. But I think you have described them very well in your question. Is it really, if we show that a hero is willing to either outright kill the henchman on his way or her way or their way to the main villain, or either outright kill them or just fight them in a very reckless way where it's very easy to see that they could have been killed as a result of fighting the hero. But then when he gets to the main villain, all of a sudden it's, oh, gee, moral dilemma time. Do I want to kill this villain or not? Yeah, that is a very... I see why you have a problem with that trope. I've never watched The Last Airbender, so I can't speak to it in that context, but it's bothered me for a while in superhero movies, even ones that I've really liked, like The Dark Knight. There are scenes where Batman acts in an extremely reckless way, and in the movie, because it's a movie and because you can control the reality of the situation, it's never made explicit that Batman kills anybody. And so we can assume that he doesn't kill anybody, but some of his behavior is extremely reckless. And if it were done in real life, there could be a very real possibility that he would kill somebody, like during the chase when Batman is on the Bat-Pod, his motorcycle, and he's chasing after the Joker. And there are a few instances where there are obstacles in his path, and he just shoots, like he shoots at them and blows them up. And it's like, oh shit, good thing there wasn't anybody on the other side of that dumpster, or good thing there wasn't anybody in that car that Batman just blew up to get out of his way, or good thing he didn't run anybody over when he drove through the window into the indoor shopping center and just, speeded straight through it on his motorcycle. And good thing he didn't run anybody over because they couldn't get out of the way in time. So that kind of thing, it's not quite the same as what you're saying because Batman isn't shown as actually hurting anybody, but it's that kind of reckless behavior that makes me think like, God, couldn't they have found another way to stage this? It's better than the Zack Snyder version where you just assume that people probably did die because the amount of collateral damage is so massive, it's almost impossible that somebody wasn't killed. But still, it's like the recklessness of it, and then there's, like in The Dark Knight, there's the moment where he captures the Joker by not killing him. And they make a big point of that he's not going to kill the Joker. He's going to choose to be better than that. And it's like, all right, cool. I'm glad that there was nobody in that car you blew up, or there was nobody behind that dumpster. Or you didn't run anybody over with the motorcycle, right? So yeah, I do think it's And again, it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the movie so much because I think The Dark Knight is a great movie and I still enjoy it a lot. But when I think about it, that's one thing about it that kind of nags at the back of my mind. So I totally get where you're coming from with your problem with that trope. Next question is from Alex Weigel. Is it racist of me to think Juneteenth is a stupid name for a holiday? Serious question. I know it's not meant for me, so I shouldn't have an opinion, but it describes neither what it is nor when it is. It's just a lazy pun. How about Emancipation Day or Freedom Day? It's frustrating to me to see a missed opportunity to send a message. I suppose it's just none of my business. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it is none of your business, but and it's not racist, I don't think. I mean, me speaking as a white person, it's not necessarily my decision, but it doesn't sound racist to me to say that you think it's not a good name. But, you know, I don't know. I don't get hung up on stuff like that. To me, Juneteenth is what it's called. I am of the belief that the title of a thing is not really all that important once you come to know what the thing is. Like the title is just a tag that you attach to it so you know what to call it. So when you refer to it, other people will know what you're talking about. A title is a kind of shorthand. So you could say like, well, it doesn't describe what the day is. But, you know, if you called it Emancipation Day or Freedom Day, and I think some people do call it Emancipation Day. It's not just called Juneteenth. There are other names for it, but Juneteenth is the most commonly known one. But if you called it Emancipation Day or Freedom Day, those are fairly generic terms too. That doesn't necessarily tell you what the holiday is for either. You know, you could say like, well, Emancipation Day comes closer because we have come to celebrate the end of slavery on Juneteenth. But emancipation, it could refer to any number of things. You know, it could refer to the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was made, and it doesn't quite refer to that. You know, or Freedom Day, like what that could mean a million different things. So Juneteenth is just what it's called, and once you learn about it, it doesn't really matter what the name of it is. What matters is what it stands for. You know, the symbolism of a flag isn't necessarily immediately apparent when you look at the flag for the first time, but once you understand what it all means, you know, then it's different. Then it means something. So I don't know. I don't get hung up too much on titles, you know, and whether or not it's always been called Juneteenth as long as I've known about it. So I never really thought anything else about it. Juneteenth is just the name of the day. What's important is what the day stands for. Dr. Babylon, you put in another placeholder question that had not been replaced with your actual question by the time I went on the air. So I'm sorry that I won't get to answer your question this time. I will repeat my suggestion that maybe you just post your question instead of posting a placeholder. Maybe just post your question. That's just an idea. So next proper question is from Margie. Are you into or are you well versed in the 9 Enneagram personality types? Me and my younger brother often like to examine and play with the implication of each character's personality types. Salutations. And by characters, I mean the fictional characters in the Star Trek universe. LOL, a little vague there, haha. I'm faintly familiar with it. I'm not all that well versed in it, and but I did look at it. I did look up a website, so I think maybe after I get through all the rest of the patron questions, I kind of want to come back to this, and maybe we can have some fun with it in the live chat, and we can talk about like which Star Trek characters we think belong to which particular type, purely for entertainment purposes, because I don't know a lot about it, but it has the whiff of kind of a pseudoscience-y thing. Like I don't think there's any formal sort of psychological or psychiatric value to these personality types, but it could be fun to examine the types and to try to imagine, like, you know, where we think a particular Star Trek character would go. So let's all put a pin in this for now, and after I get through the rest of the patron questions in the live chat afterwards, we can come back and we can sort of look at the types and try to figure out where we think the different characters would belong. So let's do that. And moving on to General Contact Unit Problem Child. So the other day I was watching Kevin Logan interview a woman who'd accused a prominent YouTube streamer of stuff. It's not really relevant to my question, so I don't want to go into it. Christy, and presume you mean Christy Winters. Christy showed up in the chat. I tagged her and said, I believe Tara. One of the other mods told me to take it elsewhere, but most of them, including SRG, echoed the hashtag. Christy responded by accusing me of being obsessed with calling her out. After that, one of the mods tagged her and said, as a rape survivor, I would really appreciate if you would drop your thing against victims. Christy responded by saying we were all bullying her. Imagine you had no idea who Christy Winters was, that you'd never had any interactions with her, that all you knew about this person is that she was a minor liberal YouTuber who claims to be a feminist, but refuses to believe the accusations against Joe Biden. Now imagine this person showed up in the chat of one of your streams and reacted the way I described above to people attempting to call them out. What type of person do you think you'd think Christy Winters was after that? Okay, well, first of all, again, as usually happens when you ask me these kinds of questions, I was not there. I did not see the interaction in question. But if Christy said that you were obsessed with calling her out, I mean, you've asked me about her a lot. So I don't know if you're obsessed with calling her out, but there have been several times that you have asked me questions attempting to, I guess, try to extract some kind of criticism of Christy from me or get me to think that she's a bad person or to disown her in some way. So I don't know if it's an obsession or not, but it does come up repeatedly in your questions to me. Now, I don't necessarily remember it being a theme in the patron questions, but in the live chat, it's been a recurring theme. Let's just say that. And look, I don't know how I would respond if I didn't know who Christy was and that was going on in my chat. I may well side with the people saying hashtag I believe Tara Reid. I don't know, but it just so happens that I do know Christy, and I disagree with her about the Tara Reid thing. Like, I do believe the accusations, and I do believe that they deserve to be taken seriously. She doesn't think that. I disagree with her about that. I don't think it means she's not a feminist. I don't think it means that she's automatically a terrible person. I know several people who have told me in private that they do not believe the accusations against Biden, or that they have serious doubts about them. I am not one of those people. I assume Tara Reid is telling the truth. And as I have said many times already, I intend to vote for Joe Biden anyway, because I see no alternative. So, you know, that's where we're at. Like, in terms of who we're voting for, Christy and I agree. It's just that she happens to not believe the accusations against Biden. We disagree on that. We've never really talked about it in depth. You know, it's not a disagreement between the two of us that I have spent a lot of time contemplating. But, you know, if you have a problem with Christy not believing Tara Reid, I don't see what that has to do with me. I mean, it does feel a little strange that you're trying to pull me into something when, to me, there's no issue between me and Christy. I disagree with her about this, but there's no issue between us. Like, I'm not mad at her. I'm not out to get her. I don't see how it would accomplish anything to get in her face about it in a live chat, you know. And I mean, Christy can be responsible for what she says herself. Like, if she has said something about Tara Reid or about Joe Biden that has been offensive or whatever, like, she can take responsibility for that and deal with that herself. You know, I'm not sure what you want me to say. to be honest, I'm not sure what you want me to say, other than I believe Tara Reid. I disagree with Christy, but I don't think that it makes Christy Winters a terrible person, and she's still my friend. So there you go. Next question is from Mike. Compare contrast question. While both Voyager and Enterprise had bad finales, which was worse? My thought is that taken as individual episodes, it might seem like Enterprise was worse, but my thought is that Enterprise got a pretty good final episode and resolution in the previous episode. Voyager, on the other hand, had a fully shitty resolution. No one on the show gets any catharsis. It's like the writers just scribbled, then they got home and called it a day. It's really tough because, I mean, look, if you're going to say that the two-parter before the Enterprise finale sort of counts as the real finale of the show, then yeah, that I do think that was better than Endgame on Voyager. But that wasn't that. That's I feel like that's kind of cheating. Like that wasn't actually the finale of the show. The finale of the show was These Are the Voyages, and I think These Are the Voyages is a worse episode than Endgame. I don't think Endgame is a great episode either, but I think as a piece of writing, as just an episode of television, I think it is better than the last episode of Enterprise. I mean, I agree with you that there's not it's not a great finale because it seems like they hang everything on Voyager getting home and that's it. Like there's no, they actually pass up opportunities for character resolution in the Voyager in the Voyager finale. I've made the point of mentioning a couple of times, like there's no closure between Tom Paris and his father, even though they are both there. Like there was easily an opportunity to have those two characters have some kind of an interaction in the last few minutes of the series. They just didn't do it, which has always kind of irritated me because they introduce Tom's father as a recurring character. And he's in that episode, and then it's like it's not mentioned, it's not resolved. But despite that, I think the Voyager finale is a better episode, judged on its own merits, than the Enterprise finale. But neither one of them are really great episodes. I'm not going to fight anybody. David A., do you think the relationship between Dr. Bashir and Serena Douglas in the DS9 episode Chrysalis is problematic? The idea of doctors having relationships with their parents is frowned upon, to say the least, due to the power imbalance, but I've never seen this addressed and even seen it lauded as a positive relationship. I do have a problem with it. Yeah. I do think it's a little problematic. It's a little creepy because of the doctor-patient thing, and also because of the naivete of Serena. Like she goes through this sort of flowers for Algernon procedure where it's very condescending to say that she's like a child, because she's not. But she has been given an avenue to sort of transcend some limitations that she was dealing with previously, and for Bashir to kind of, I don't think Bashir is written in a way that we're meant to think that he intends to take advantage of her, but I do think he acts unprofessionally and irresponsibly, and yeah, I do think it's a little problematic. And I think eventually I'm going to do a Trek Actually video about things like that, about relationships in Star Trek that are like that aren't out and out wrong or out and out like bad, but are just kind of problematic and kind of creepy in ways that maybe the writers didn't intend or didn't realize, and that sort of make our heroes look worse than maybe the producers of the show realized at the time. And I think Bashir and Serena would be one example I would use in that video for sure. John Burnsy, I was wondering if people moving forward will have to forever stop watching any episode that Majel Barrett is in. Not because of her acting, but because in 1980 it was fine to have a character whose livelihood was based on being daughter of the fifth house of Beta Z, holder of the sacred chalice of Reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z, and certainly something she never failed to mention in formal introductions. But now in 2020, we live in a society where such a thing is more like your waspy aunt reminding you of, so you'll think she's actually accomplished something. I don't know, I'm Canadian and we're all kinds of nations up here, community of communities, but what Loxana Troy kept mentioning was a great truth. Many women today are where they are not because of what they've done, but because of who their father or their husband were. That is okay for 2020, but for 2390, 2450, kind of sad, don't you think? And this is acting. Majel can argue that she's the first lady of Star Trek, but someone had to play the annoying one, and she sure gave Q a run for his money as to who could annoy Jean-Luc more. Terrible character, seriously anachronistic, of course, but bad acting? I don't think it was acting. I think it was a way for Gene to honor his wife, and it fit into how people viewed what the future might be. But you look back on it, you can't help but think that once she starts off with listing all of her titles, she's kind of trapped within that existence, and no amount of great acting can get her out of that. But you might have different thoughts about this. Yeah, I take the listing of all of her titles there as satirical. I think that's part of what the character was trying to accomplish, at least initially, was to be sort of a parody of those kinds of characters. She's the overbearing mother / mother-in-law or prospective mother-in-law who is always reminding you of her status, even though if you listen carefully, she's reminding you of a status that she has not actually earned. They're just inherited titles. So I think part of that was meant to be satirical. I still don't think it works all that well. Like as I said in this week's comment response video, and I've said before, like I don't think she is a good character, but I do think the bit about always going through the list of her titles is meant to be sort of a parody of like an overbearing, pompous, aristocratic person. That's the deal with all the business with Mr. Halm as well. Her valet, is that she's sort of meant to be kind of buffoonish. And I don't think any of that has anything to do with Majel Barrett's performance. I still think that Majel Barrett's acting performance as Loaxana was, for the most part, not very good. And I've gotten a lot of comments from people on on Wednesday's video where I mentioned this again, pointing out examples where they think that she was good. And the most popular one seems to be the scenes with Odo in the turbo lift. On her first Deep Space Nine episode, and I will agree that she is better in some of those scenes, but it's still not. It still has the same problem that I described or tried to describe having with her in my video, my comment response video, which is I just don't believe her. Some people described it as a form of not having a suspension of disbelief, and that is a fair way to put it. But in acting terms, it's just I don't believe you. When I look at Majel Barrett playing Loaxana, I all I can think of is I don't believe you. Like you have not. I see you acting. I don't see Loaxana. I see Majel Barrett pretending to be somebody. I see Majel Barrett giving line readings, and to me, that's not good acting. And she's not, by far, she is not the only person in Star Trek guilty of it, but she's almost always guilty of it. Like in almost every scene that she does in all of her appearances. So I don't think it has to do with the acting. I think, but I do think you make a good point about, having a character like that in the 24th century, and isn't that kind of sad? Maybe it's the state of Betazoid culture, But I think part of that is meant to be humorous, and I think it's a separate issue from my issues with her acting. Next question is from Patrick Simpson. Steve, what did you think of the Twitter Shatner storm around the hysterical McDonald's cop and her identifying errant behavior? Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit in the Facepalm 5 this week. I think it's ridiculous. I think that whole situation is laughable, and I think she was deservedly mocked for that video. I mean, as I said in the Facepalm 5, when you go to McDonald's, they have parking spaces designated for people to pull off and park off to the side so that they don't hold up the drive-through line while they wait for their food. Because late food is something that happens relatively frequently in busy drive-through restaurants, right? It happens often enough that McDonald's and a lot of other drive-thrus, they have designated spaces for you to pull off and wait while they get your food ready so that the people in line behind you can keep going. Right. So there's nothing remotely suspicious about it. It speaks, I think, to. And then they screwed up her order, which, again, is something that happens. Like, it's happened to me. I don't feel persecuted because McDonald's screwed up my order once. I don't feel persecuted because they asked me to pull over because my fries weren't ready or my hash browns weren't ready or whatever. I think it speaks to the persecution complex that a lot of cops in the United States have, because they center themselves as opposed to centering the people that are being harmed by police. So she was a buffoon. She's ridiculous. Her concerns are laughable. Neo-normie UPS man of the apocalypse. The Last of Us 2 has been pushing supposed woke politics and game mechanics about violence begetting violence, but with the mistreatment of the Naughty Dog staff and the same highlighting of the worst arguments and fake from the studio reviews using techniques previously used by astroturfing ad agencies for politics and big oil, why are the left taken in and defending multi-billion-dollar firms like Naughty Dog, Sony, and Disney, and attacking people who in some cases weren't paid during the current COVID crisis and forced to work 14-hour days, 6 days a week with no extras like overtime pay? Isn't wokeness being used by capitalism to silence oppressed workers who make these games, whilst people like Neil Druckmann get accolades and a wave of defenders on social media who then accuse people of woke cynicism of being Nazis? Yeah, I think a lot of it is just people don't know. You know, most people who are not that involved with the game industry or don't know how it works just don't know about the mistreatment of game developers and game designers and programmers, and don't know about the long hours, don't know about how the amount of pressure that they are put under to finish a game by a deadline and all these other things. They just don't know about it. I'm only dimly aware of it because I have friends who are into video games and I learn about it from them, because like I don't know any of that stuff. I pay no attention. I'm not a gamer. Like, so, you know, I may instinctively want to focus on the woke elements of the game instead of the plight of the designers and the programmers, because I just don't know about that. You know, so but are companies using that to their benefit? Of course they are. Sure, of course. You don't see the companies, you know, drawing people's attention to how overworked their staffs are, do you? They don't they don't point that out on their own. Other people have to point that out. So yes, of course it's being exploited. Yeah, to make themselves look good or to draw attention away from a problem that they should be addressing that they don't want to address, you know? Because most companies will not address even serious problems when it comes to their labor force if they know they can get away with not addressing it. That's just the way it is. That's why businesses need to be regulated. Because if there is not an entity forcing them to do the right thing, in most cases they will not do the right thing. They will do the profitable thing, whatever it happens to be. So of course they're exploiting it. Of course they are. Lynn Kibblemom, while thinking back on series that I loved back in the day, I was recently reminded of one I hadn't thought of or seen in decades and wondered if you were familiar with it, and if so, what you thought of it. I'm speaking of Dinosaurs, a series using Muppets puppets from Jim Henson. Think of Father Knows Best or All in the Family, but with dinosaurs. It allowed for clever commentary on contemporary issues such as racism, feminism, environmentalism, consumer culture, sexuality, corporate power, war, etc. The father, Earl Sinclair, worked as a tree pusher for the We Say So Corporation, demolishing the forest for short-term corporate profits. His wife, Fran, struggled to find fulfillment in something other than being a wife and mother. Their teenage son, Robbie, angsted over how he could be an herbivore when both his parents were carnivores. It's not hereditary, you know. Their teenage daughter struggled with peer pressure, while their youngest subverted all expectations of cute babies. Well worth checking out if you haven't seen it. And it also has some of my all-time favorite lines, e.g. Robbie describing his weekend plans to spend time playing loud rock and roll with his friends as 3 days of adolescent male posturing. Good times. Yes, I watched Dinosaurs when it was originally on TV. I will once again tout my rapidly advancing age. I watched it in the 90s when it was on ABC. I think it was part of TGIF, I think, wasn't it? I think it was, at least for a while, for a spell, it was a show in the TGIF lineup. And it was certainly from what I recall, the most overtly political show. I mean, if people remember how lightweight and vapid and just utterly free of conscious political and social commentary ABC sitcoms were in the 90s, especially the TGIF sitcoms. I mean, the level of satire in Dinosaurs is still kind of extraordinary. And yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a terrific show at the time. And looking back on it, I like it even more than I liked it back then. And not only was it a great vehicle for some, admittedly, some very broad social satire, but still, I appreciate it. It was also, it was just usually a really funny show, and had easily the darkest ending of pretty much any sitcom I can think of. If for those of you who haven't seen the show, just imagine if you were going to do like the darkest possible ending for a sitcom about dinosaurs, and you'll probably get close to what the ending of Dinosaurs is. Bruce Bartup, is it too late to hope that Trump will fail of renomination? Was that short enough of a question? Yes, Bruce, bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for being one of the only patrons. I can't say that. There are some other short questions on the list this time, but I appreciate you taking the time to ask a brief question. Thank you so much. Yes, it is too late. He's definitely going to get the nomination. He's mostly unchallenged. I mean, he's essentially the Republican nomination. The Republican primary this time around is basically uncontested. There have been a few candidates who have attempted to challenge Trump, but I mean, none of them got anywhere close. So no, it is too late for Trump to. He will definitely be the nominee. And that is an albatross that hopefully we will hang around the neck of the Republican Party and never, ever, ever let them get rid of it. Next question from Eric Allen. Given how Starfleet represents all of humanity and more, wouldn't it make more sense to have the human characters and extras be mostly non-white humans? If we're keeping score representationally, it should be mostly Asians, East Indians included, and Africans. And I'm sure I understand that it's an American TV series, so it's of course going to be dominated by white males, but it is an interesting thing to think about if most of the cast were non-white. I especially love thinking about how pissed those incels and conservative dumbasses would be. I actually think this is something that should become standard procedure in shows like this, where, and especially for a show like Star Trek, which has representation like in its DNA. I honestly believe that there should be an effort made when you are depicting background players, extras, characters that don't necessarily have lines or have one or two sort of token lines of dialogue, but aren't like that important to the story, but are just there to fill out the world. I do think there should be more of an effort made to feature non-white actors in those roles. And I think that obviously it should extend to the actual lead characters in the show as well. Like, I know you shouldn't just have the people of color in the background and the white people up front getting to say all the lines and drive all the stories. It should be both. But yeah, I do think that there should be more of a focus on having people of color in as background players as well as playing important characters. Because not only is it more reflective of reality and more realistic for a future where there is no more inequality on Earth, supposedly, or at least there is no more significant racial inequality or national, ethnic inequality. It makes sense that there would be a lot more non-white faces than there would be white faces. And I'm not suggesting they shouldn't put any white people on screen. Just a lot. They should flip it. Instead of having a white person be the default, focus on featuring non-white people and include white people as well. But make an effort to include non-white folks first and foremost. I actually think that would be a really, really great thing to do and should become standard practice, especially for shows like Star Trek. Which has that kind of representation built into it. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. And yes, absolutely, it would piss off the incels and the conservatives. And that's not the main reason to do it. You should do it because it's the right thing to do. But it's definitely a bonus. Like if you are going to do something that will piss off conservatives, it's not like a guarantee that it's the right thing to do. But it's a pretty good sign. Isaiah Taylor. So, here's my take on the statues. I'm rather indifferent to the matter, actually. Yes, I do understand the inflammatory nature of the statues, but to me, I'm not too particularly concerned about them. To me, they're just toilets for the birds. What's more important is that we deal with the real-time systemic racism and discrimination, since that affects us in the real world. That's just my opinion. On a second note, I'm building a starship model of a Nebula-class ship. The USS Riga will be assigned to study planetary nebula in order to get a consensus on the evolution of stars like our sun. I thought that this will be better than the Enterprise D just visiting random planets with Roman numerals after them. Our first stop as captain will be NGC 7293, also known as the Helix Nebula, then the Dumbbell Nebula, the Ring Nebula, and others. I want to go to places undiscovered by Starfleet or anybody else. I want it to be a combination of a science fiction story and horror, as this is unknown territory, so we don't know what we may run into. What do you think? I think it sounds like a great idea. And yeah, I agree with you about the statues. But I still don't mind having the statues torn down. Like, I don't think the tearing down of the statues should be viewed as an end unto itself. It should be viewed as important for what it represents, and I think it should be backed up by the taking on of systemic racism that you describe being actually the important bit. Like, I agree with you there, but while we're doing that, why don't we tear down the shitty statues too? And yeah, I think the Star Trek concept sounds really cool. I love when Star Trek incorporates like real stars. You know, when like that's just a cool thing that sort of tickles the space nerd part of my brain. Ahoy Yerno, I really appreciate how you keep the rest of the world in mind during your Facepalm 5, but also in many other videos. A lot of other lefty creators still work from a strictly Americentric view, even those who don't live in the USA. I don't remember which video, but you just made a remark about something your president did and made sure to include the damage it does to non-USA countries, so thank you for that. As for the question, do you have masks? Where did you get them? Can we see them? How do people respond to you wearing them? Here it's completely uncontroversial. I learned to make my own. Sewing is a skill I learned during lockdown. Did you do any self-improvement during this time you wouldn't have done otherwise? Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for the compliment about including non-USA interests in my videos. I make an effort to acknowledge that there is a world beyond the United States. And I don't do a lot beyond that, unfortunately. I can't really brag too much. But if that is something you have noticed and and you appreciate it, I'm glad I thank you very much. I do try to, if I like, especially on Facepalm 5, if I am talking about something that is like very US centric and may not be known or of particular interest to international viewers, I do at least try to acknowledge that and say, for those of you outside the United States, I'm going to be talking mostly to my fellow Americans for the next few minutes. Like, I feel like that's just, it's good for me as an American to get into the habit as much as it is anything else. And as for me having a mask, yes, I do have a mask. I have a picture of it in here somewhere that I will show to you. And it's a homemade mask, and here, so my wife actually made it for me. I didn't make it myself, but it's made out of an old handkerchief of mine, and here it is. That's me in my mask. I actually took that just today at Walmart because I saw your question earlier, and I thought I should get a picture of myself in my mask. So that's me shopping earlier today at Walmart, going grocery shopping, and that's me in my mask. And yeah, it's not controversial. Not really. There are some people around here who aren't wearing them or who are raising a fuss about wearing them. But, when I was in Walmart today, most people were wearing them. There were a few people who had them on, but had them pulled down or had them pulled down under their nose, so their nose wasn't covered by the mask, which is like really, really annoying. But most people are wearing them in my area, and most people are not making a big deal about it. I think most people recognize that that it's necessary, that it's for everybody's benefit. Now, there are some people who don't get that message and are very loud and obnoxious about it, but generally speaking, I think most people are doing it, and it's not controversial among like everyday folks, except for a very loud and obstreperous minority. So yeah. And no, I haven't really improved myself during lockdown. Not really. I've been basically doing the same thing I was always doing, just wearing a mask when I go out. John Gingras says, you're deep cave spelunking by yourself in some obscure caverns in Montana when there's an earthquake. Tumbling down into the darkness, you find yourself bruised and battered, but mostly unhurt. However, your way out appears to be sealed off. Venturing deeper into this cave structure, you come upon the Guardian of Forever, or at least his cousin. When you explain your predicament, he gives you the option to travel to any century other than the 21st to live out the rest of your days. Which century do you choose and why? I would choose the... oh, boy. I mean, I'm white, so it really doesn't matter. I'll be okay no matter what. I don't know. I think I would choose like the 22nd. I think I would want to go into the future. I want to go into the 22nd century. Or you didn't say I couldn't go into the future. If I can't go into the future and I have to go into the past, then I would choose to go into the 20th century because that's the closest. But if I can go into the future, I'll skip ahead. I'll go into the 22nd. Havar Hajem, discuss the impact of the Lincoln Project ads against Trump. You like these ads? Why can't Democrats offer ads like this? I have liked the Lincoln Project ads so far. I think they have been, I feel like they have hit Trump in sensitive spots, and I appreciate that. I don't know how much impact they're having, because, I mean, I was going to vote for Biden anyway before I ever saw them. So they haven't done anything for me. But if they have energized people to vote for Joe Biden and to unseat Donald Trump, then I think that's great. And why can't the Democrats offer ads like this? I don't know. I've seen one or two Biden ads, like ads by Biden's actual presidential campaign, that have been pretty good, that haven't quite been as pointed maybe as some of the Lincoln Project ads, but have still been pretty good. Not necessarily like harsh and nasty, but looking very frankly at Trump's incompetence, at his failures to deal with the COVID pandemic. I mean, some of Biden's ads that I've seen so far have been pretty good too. So I don't want to say that it's only the Lincoln Project making good anti-Trump ads. Some of the Biden campaign's ads have been pretty decent too. David Appleman, why do you think Floridians are as we are? Well, I mean, is there something in the water? I mean, you're surrounded by it. Is there? I don't know. There's some kind of compulsion that either people in Florida come by just by living there, and people outside of Florida have some other way, and for that reason feel drawn to Florida, where they will fit in, where they will be among others. They'll be among their people. Like, I don't know. It's funny. I did a live stream with someone a few weeks ago, and she is in Florida. She lives in Florida now, but she is originally from Maryland, not my part of Maryland. I think she's actually from further east than I am. But when I found that out, that she lives in Florida now, but she's originally from Maryland, my first thought was, oh, what did you do? Like, what? Like, were you banished? Like, I don't, but that's not fair. I know there are a lot of really cool people in Florida, and just as I know there are people in my local area who see how ridiculous and fucked up everything is just as well, if not better than I do. And I can't forget them. I can't judge the whole area by the shitty people. I have to remember that there are people who see just as well as I do, if not better, how shitty it is. That's the same thing with Florida. There are good people in Florida and throughout the South who are trying their best to make things better. And sometimes when I sort of make like a blanket statement about how awful Florida is or how awful the southern United States is, I leave those people out and I erase their efforts to make things better. And I don't want to do that. Although it's tempting for the sake of getting another cheap shot in at Florida, because, I mean, what the fuck? Like, seriously. Next question is from Michael Hanneline. Disclaimer, I'm married to an actress, so there is some bias on my part. I watched your video the other day where you criticized Majel Barrett's performance as the Loxana, and I was wondering if you had considered the possibility that the direction given was bad. So often you see actors who seem to give terrible performances in one movie, show, etc., but their performances in works both before and after are stellar. Usually this isn't because they temporarily forgot how to act, but because at the end of the day, they have to give the performance that they are directed to give, and sometimes that director is giving bad direction to that performer, even if they are managing to give good direction in other aspects. Do you think that is worth considering? Oh, absolutely, yes. I don't know if it is the most reasonable explanation in the case of Majel Barrett as the Loxana, because she played Loxana in so many different episodes and was directed by so many different people. And I don't know if it's reasonable to assume that she was given bad direction every time by every different director that she worked with. I think it's a combination of the character and the actor just not being suited to the character, or not having whatever skills would be necessary to play that character well. And maybe she was given poor direction the first time she played the character, and that influenced how she played her from that point on. Or maybe the producers gave her bad advice, or Roddenberry himself gave her bad advice early on about how she should play Loaxana, or how she should view the character, or whatever that influenced it. I don't know. All I know is I do not think she acts well. I do not in the role of Loaxana. I do not think that she is doing good work when she plays the Loaxana. Danny K. Hi, Steve. What if a Starfleet ship had its own Twitter feed? I mean, like the computer of the ship? Or would there be a social media director on the ship, and their job would be to just sort of tweet what's been going on the ship lately? Boy, if that was the case, if it was the Enterprise, can you imagine how bonkers that Twitter feed would be? Can you imagine how bonkers the Twitter feed that just posted updates about what's going on the Enterprise? Like, for the Enterprise D, today we somehow stumbled into a pocket of space where there was a giant face that randomly killed a few of us, and then almost made Captain Picard blow up the ship rather than let the giant face experiment on us. And then we got out. You know, like the Twitter feed for the Enterprise D would be bonkers. Would be bonkers. As bonkers as a Neil Adams Batman comic from about 5 or 6 years ago. About 10 years ago, actually, I think is the one I'm thinking of. Anyway, Orion McMurray, a few dad jokes for you. When Picard goes to a tailor, does he ask them to make it so? Aww. Do you think when Riker was making pizza, Picard asked him to make the dough? I don't know about that one. When Picard orders French cuisine, does he ask for escargot? I will see myself out now. Thank you very much. Thank you for the jokes, and also thank you for seeing yourself out. Vovacat17, Vladimir Kuznetsov, just read this one from start to finish once and tell the stream the most important parts of it. This is my first time here, so sorry, being shorter would not have the full effect. We won't write anything this long here anymore. And I did read the whole thing, just so you know, and then I edited it to present to the stream here, but I did read the whole thing. And anybody who is a patron of mine can go to the question solicitation post for Ask Away number 63 and read the entire post as well if you want. So this is going to be the truncated version. Seriously though, I wanted to write Facepalm 5 Russian edition, but I will just stick to Facepalm 3. The half-assed version. These are just the most important things you got to know about stuff that's going on. Not a comprehensive list. Promise to tell you more next time. RF equals Russian Federation. So here we go. The Facepalm 3 Russian style. Number 1, half-assed internet censorship. There's no net neutrality in RF. There never was. Russia holds platforms accountable for any content they house, so RKN, the Russian Communication Supervision Agency, just threatens to block any site that doesn't comply to rules, copyright, and they block a lot. The worst thing is that they have no idea how the internet works. They tried to block Telegram, the messenger service, once, but it is using dynamic IP provided by Google and Amazon, so the RKN blocked 16 million IPs before realizing their own services and government sites were using the same IPs. So there was this week in Russia where only a random half of the internet was accessible. Wow. Number 2, the Russian Orthodox Church. Well, it sucks. It also sucks. Oh, did I mention it sucks? It is sponsored by the government. The state actually provides land for building churches. And the main idea of the Orthodox Church, as opposed to Western Christianity, is that people should treat their God with fear and experience no joy in doing so. Suffer now, work hard, and praise any authority above you. Relief will come in heaven. Basically the same idea that that Tsar is heaven sent and you should all serve him. That being a poor peasant is being closer to God. So you should donate all your money to the church. And while saying that, the patriarch, the church leader, is one of the richest people in Russia, and he gets most of his money from taxpayers and poor people who make donations. Oh, and we also now have a law that, quote, protects the feelings of the believers, which allows the government to sometimes jail people for sharing atheist memes. And number 3, the, quote, constitutional amendments. They've decided to make some changes to the Constitution. They told us which changes they were going to make. They made them official, signed all the papers, and said that the changes are final and nothing is going to stop them from being implemented now. It already happened. And now they really want us to vote for them. No, the order of things is right. They've already decided, and now we have the vote. The main reason they are doing it is because Putin's second consecutive term is ending soon. There are also some vague placeholder changes like preserving the culture and protecting animals. Also, the one that says Russian law inside Russian borders has higher priority to any international treaty Russia may take part in, and the marriage is a union between a man and a woman. The worst part is who they used to first present the idea in Parliament. It was Valentina Tereshkova, one of the lawmaking parliament members. She's also known as the first woman in space, like ever. They used the hero we all believed in to spread authoritarianism. I am just sad. Thanks for reading. Spread awareness. Learn more. Don't nuke Moscow. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Some of that I was dimly aware of, but like I didn't know about the internet stuff. I didn't know all of that about the Russian Orthodox Church. And the thing about Valentina Tereshkova is like a knife in my heart because she's a hero of mine. I did a video about her a couple years ago when I was still doing the 5 Things series. I did a video about Valentina Tereshkova. She was the first woman in space, and she's a real life goddamn hero. And she went into space in the 60s. I think 16 or 18 years before the first American woman went into space. The first American woman didn't go into space until I think 1983, and Valentina Tereshkova went up in I think 64 or 65, maybe 66, something like that. But yeah, she's a hero, and I knew that she was involved in government, but I did not know that she had been used by the government to present the constitutional amendments. That's too bad. Yeah. Thank you for sharing and for raising awareness. I'm only too happy to spread that along. Nathaniel Robinson, hi Steve, hope all is going well. Did Eddington co-opt the Maquis cause? Many of the leaders of the Maquis whom we meet are not themselves settlers of the Federation Cardassian borderlands. Of course, Chakotay was born on one of the colonies. Moreover, these leaders also don't seem to take the settlers' interest in self-determination to heart. Cal Hudson seems interested in being a mouthpiece for the settlers, but I find that nailing down his intentions to be difficult. Chakotay would seem to have some interest in having been born in the colonies, although he was opposed to the Maquis until his father died resisting the treaty. His membership seems to be at least partially tied to self-discovery, which is admirable. Things get a little funny after Chakotay and Hudson. Everyone else seems to have some desire to give the Federation a black eye more than support the settlers. Rolaren is partially carrying on her lifelong opposition to the Cardassians. Paris and Torres seem to have been spoiling for a fight after their Starfleet careers ended. However, Eddington seems to put his cultural critique of the Federation above all else. He emphasizes how the Federation makes its citizens unnatural, assimilating them. He understands Starfleet's pursuit of the Maquis only as an obsession, nobody leaves paradise, rather than a reflection of policy. His leadership of the revolt may help the Maquis and the settlers, but I don't feel he really represents them or any typical movement for self-determination. In the real world, Eddington would be more fair-weather friend than ally. That's a good point, and I think it is reflected a little bit in Sisko's view of Eddington. And obviously, Sisko's view of Eddington is also extremely influenced by his personal feelings because he feels betrayed by Eddington and he feels responsible for Eddington because Eddington was under his command, and there's like a very personal conflict between the two of them. But he also seems to recognize that Eddington is using the Maquis, in a sense, to make himself into a hero. That's one of the big sort of themes of the post-Maquis Eddington episodes. Like after Eddington turns and is revealed to be Maquis and he becomes an antagonist, that is the crux of a lot of his scenes with Sisko, where Sisko is telling him, you are using the plight of these people to give yourself an opportunity to be a hero. Like, you are not really doing what is best for them. You are using them for yourself, for your own ego, for your own purposes. You know, there's that scene where they meet on the Maquis planet, where Sisko tells him, you know, you have lied to these people. You have told these people that they will be able to go back to their homes someday. And that is not going to happen. You are lying to them, and you're doing it to earn their loyalty so you can be a leader, so you can be a hero. So yeah, I mean, I think that's written into Eddington's character. That is acknowledged. That is a conscious, you know, willful part of the story that they tell. And it's one of the things that makes it so great, because yeah, Eddington does have a point. Like, if you listen to what Eddington says, a lot of what he says has a ring of truth to it. But a lot of what Sisko says about him also has a ring of truth to it, that he is an opportunist, that he is not one of them, that he is someone who joined the cause because not only because he wanted to be self-aggrandizing or he wanted to be a leader, but also because he had a point to make. And he wanted to make his point. And there's something disingenuous about that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a really interesting take on Eddington, and one that I think is reflected to an extent in the show itself. Joe McClory, I have a question and a bit of a rant to go with it, and hope you will rant a bit as well if you're experiencing the same. Are there anti-mask people around you? I don't mean people that are tired of the inconvenience and don't want to wear them anymore, because that is at least understandable. I mean people who try to shame and bully other people not to wear masks or social distance. I get being against the government telling you that you need to wear a mask, but lying and scolding people who are trying to keep themselves and families safe because they don't want the reminder of their own moral failing to do the same is just so shitty. I agree with you. I don't have anybody around me, or I can't think of anybody off the top of my head in my own personal life that is like that. But there are definitely people in my sort of extended social circle that have made a point of proudly saying that they are not social distancing. And needless to say, I am not going anywhere near them. But yeah, I've seen people say on social media, or heard sort of through the grapevine from other people, that there are people who are in my extended circle who are not taking it seriously, who are shrugging at the whole thing, or looking at it, you know, very dismissively and very snidely, and thinking that wearing a mask is silly and closing everything is silly and it's nothing to worry about, and making it a point of pride to say, like, well, we're not doing any of that. We're not social distancing. We're not doing any of that. And I mean, all I can say to them is, well, good luck. Like, I hope you don't get sick, because if one of you gets sick, all of you will probably get sick, because you're dipshits, because you're fools, you're not taking any precautions. So if one of you catches it, the rest of you will probably catch it too. And you'll probably spread it to a lot of other people who don't even know that you have it, because you're monsters, basically. You're taking reckless action that will endanger not only you and your families, but innocent people that you may encounter in the world. You know? So it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. And it makes me, and some of these people are people I didn't really like to begin with, and it just sort of confirms some of my worst suspicions about what kind of people they were. And yeah, so that's the most that I have around me. I don't think I have any like who are preaching like anti-mask stuff, or who are trying to like convince other people not to wear masks or not to take precautions. But I do know some people who are trying to make a virtue out of not wearing a mask. And yeah, it's shitty. They suck. They're terrible people. Plasma Burn Death, just asking if you can mention on your video to have people start to review, and your thoughts about this would be welcome as we parse out our research of SARS-CoV-2 2019, blah, 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 you know, COVID-19. this part of the topic, Funware, the data firm company for the Trump campaign that happens to be really big into metadata GPS tracking, remote doctor visits, etc., got millions in small business relief. Funware launches National Ventilator Registry, March 27, 2020. While the same time frame, Trump was delaying getting more ventilators or getting production going on making more ventilators, blaming hospitals for shortages. At another point, Trump suggested that states begging for equipment are actually stocked up and that certain hospitals might be hoarding ventilators. States nationwide have said they also need many of these too. Frankly, many of the states are stocked up, Trump said. Some of them don't admit it, but they have. We have just sent them so many things to them, including ventilators. You know, there's a question as to hoarding of ventilators. Some hospitals and independent hospitals and some hospital chains, as we call them, they're holding ventilators. They just don't want to let up. We need them for certain areas where there's big problems. We have built a data engine that is capable of managing over 1 billion active devices and 4 billion daily transactions while generating more than 5 terabytes of data each day, said Randall Crowder, COO of Funware. We can leverage our technology to identify and track critical medical assets like ventilators, but we need to act now and we need everyone's help getting the word out to medical professionals on the front line so that we can collect the information that we desperately need. Funware announces partnership with Comport for best-in-class mobile patient experience. Partnership provides hospitals a fully integrated platform for a single digital front door patient engagement strategy. So this is yet another link directly to Trump with this huge push by his IT firm in partnership with Comport for medical metadata tracking with location GPS-based tracking system. Huge thanks. If any of the above information can make it into the stream today, even trying to take bite-sized chunks of research done is still lots of information. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Are you suggesting that the Trump administration may be involved in something underhanded and maybe acting in such a way so as to allow Trump himself or certain companies that are friendly to him or associated with him in some way to profit from this pandemic and also possibly even compromise the privacy of people who are threatened by it? Is that what you're saying? Because that sounds completely plausible. It sounds exactly like something Donald Trump would do. John Brockman, abolish the police? Well, I mean, if you're asking, in certain cases, I'll go with you on that. I will say, abolish them and then rebuild them from the ground up, like radically rethink what role the police should have in our lives and in our society. And in some cases, in some communities, you know, maybe abolishing them would be a good idea. I mean, I'm sure there are some communities who don't need them. Like, we don't have a town police force here in Sharpsburg. I mean, we do in the Stephen Stuffy universe. I made it up for the story. But in reality, here in the town of Sharpsburg, like, there is no town police force. The town I grew up in, Clear Spring, also a very, very small town. No police force there either. We didn't need one. So I'm sure there are other communities. There are probably communities that have police forces that maybe they don't need them. And they could abolish them, and that would be fine. You know, I think it has to be a case-by-case thing. But yeah, in general, I think we should be radically rethinking what the police are for and what they're doing and what we need them to do. And in some cases, it may be the best thing may be to just not have any for a particular area. And in other cases, it may be to not have nearly as many or to not give them nearly as much money or nearly as much firepower, or like maybe don't ever give them military equipment ever for any reason. Just throwing it out there. Sean Hartley, what does the drug inaprovaline do? Is it basically the aspirin of Star Trek? Let's find out, shall we? Let's go to Memory Alpha, which is the wiki for canon Star Trek stuff, and let's look. Inaprovaline. Okay. I got the inaprovaline page up. I will show all of you so you can see as well. Okay, so here's let me see, how does this look does that look okay? Okay, you can still read that. So inaprovaline was a synaptic stimulant and cardiostimulant. It worked by fortifying the cell membranes and could be used as a preventative measure or in response to various physical illnesses. Chloromydride was a stronger version of inaprovaline. So not necessarily Star Trek aspirin, but generic Star Trek drug when the writers needed to have the doctor give the character something. How about that? Philip Boylard, we've already seen twice they won't even let us have a candidate the majority wants. So what is your plan for if Biden wins the popular vote in November, but the Electoral College hand it to Trump anyways? Again, I don't know. I don't know. I really hope that doesn't happen. I think at that point it would be time to seriously talk about getting rid of the Electoral College. If it happens 3 times in the space of 20 years, where the candidate who won the popular vote loses the Electoral College, especially if they lose the Electoral College by a very narrow margin, maybe it's time to get rid of the Electoral College and just go with the popular vote. I mean, it's probably time to do that anyway, but yeah. And finally, last question from Matthew Datcher. Considering the pandemic and debacles during the primaries, such as Republican-controlled states closing polling sites and resisting calls for mail-in ballots, how scared are you that the incumbent president can squeak out an electoral victory despite losing the popular vote in a landslide? So very connected to the previous question. Did you two collaborate on this? I'm not that scared about it, but I have had the thought. Like, it is on my mind. Especially after last time, after 2016, where Trump won a very narrow victory because he won narrow victories in particular districts of particular states. Like, he really only, if you look at the actual the states that made the difference in the Electoral College for Trump, and where he won in those states, you're talking about really a few thousand votes, maybe a couple 10,000 votes that made the difference between Trump winning the Electoral College and Hillary Clinton winning the Electoral College. So it can happen. Like, we know it can happen. And yes, I'm a little scared about it. I'm not, and because of the voter suppression stuff you mentioned in the question, Republican-controlled states pulling out all the stops to make it as difficult as possible for Democrats or people not planning to vote for Trump to exercise their right to vote. So yes, I am worried about it. I am concerned about it. I am very concerned about it. But do I think that it is a realistic possibility? I mean, maybe this is just the hopeful side of me. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. But yeah, the thought has crossed my mind. Yeah. The thought has crossed my mind. So now let's turn to the live chat, shall we? And look at this. I made it different in this part too. See, the live chat's on the screen. You can see me on the screen too. I made it better. I've only been doing this show for the last 4 or 5 years. And I finally figured out that this looks better than the other one. Matthew, you didn't read the previous questions. Well, that's okay. Dataport Doll, literally 55,000 votes. Yeah, that's something like that. So anyway, before I get too much into the questions, I do want to go back and do this personality test thing. Sorry, it's plasma burn death. Shopping at Walmart, I'm surprised. I try to only sell my soul once per year there. I shop at Walmart because it's close by and because it's relatively inexpensive. So, but I'm appropriately guilty about that. And Crudbutt says, "Isn't it time for a multi-whirlpool Michael Worley story arc?" I'm trying to think. I do want to do something for the final few episodes of the season. I'm trying to come up with something, but I haven't quite made it there yet. But yes, I agree. It is time for that. Philip Boylard, fuck Andrew Jackson. Yeah, for sure. I agree. John Brockman, more monstrous, Cardassians or Kardashians? Kardashians. Opinions no one cares about. I've been wondering, since you mentioned not seeing it, did you manage to see the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus? No, I have not seen it. So I am still negligent in that. Now, let me go to this personality test thing, because I want to take a look at this. And as I said before, I get the feeling this is mostly bullshit, but there are 9 personality types, and the 9 types are the moral perfectionist, the supportive advisor, the successful achiever, the romantic individualist, the intellectual thinker, the loyal guardian, the entertaining optimist, the protective challenger, and the peaceful mediator. So do we have any thoughts in the live chat? And by the way, this is at yourenneagramcoach.com/types. If you want to look at it on your own screen, because I'm not going to keep this on screen indefinitely. But what are some thoughts in the live chat for what Star Trek characters might be particular types? I looked at some of the details earlier, and even though Type 4 seems to deal a lot with artistic interests and imagination, it says they may be artistic, sensitive, creative, articulate, and inspiring, or moody, elitist, and self-absorbed. I think the moody and self-absorbed bit, I kind of feel like romantic individualist Type 4 screams Odo to me. Especially when you get down here to core longing. The core longing of these people is supposedly they want to hear people say you are seen and loved for exactly who you are, special and unique. They also want to be unique, special, and authentic. And their core weakness is envy, because they feel that they are tragically flawed, that something foundational is missing inside them, and others possess qualities that they lack. Their core fear is being inadequate, emotionally cut off, plain, mundane, defective, flawed, or insignificant. I don't know. That sounds like Odo to me. So anyway, anybody in the live chat has thoughts about that, or any of the other types? It might be an interesting. Yeah, John says Type 10, the stuck in bed. Interesting. Tuvok Type 1. Yeah, the moral perfection. I can see Tuvok as Type 1. Davlin Gatesford says Type 5 is Data and Spock. Yeah, I would say so. The intellectual thinker. That says, core desire, being capable and competent. Core longing, your needs are not a problem. That's what they want to hear people say. Yeah, I could see Spock and Data being Type 5 there for sure. Okay. Red Spiral Rays. Steve, I recently watched the episode of Raw where Degeneration X debuted their theme song. If you were to get a tan, you'd look a lot like Rick Rude. Thank you. I think Rick Rude was a good looking guy. 255 AD says, question, would you mind not gaslighting me when you answer my questions? I feel like now I can't criticize Christy ever again without being accused of being obsessed. Well, I'm just saying how it looks to me. If you don't think you're obsessed, then that's fine. And I apologize if it sounded like I was gaslighting you, but it comes up a lot. Like, that's all I'm going to say. It comes up a lot. I mean, I'm sorry if that upsets you, but I've noticed that it comes up a lot. Whether it means you're obsessed or not, I don't think I said you were obsessed. I just said it comes up a lot. And that you seem to want to try and drag a comment out of me, especially relative to Christy, frequently. And I don't know. Also, Random Geek, love the title of this Sunday's Patron Hangout. Yeah, it's number 69, so thank you. That's, yeah. Dataport doll, be honest. Did you just hate on Loxana for the grift, knowing you'd get hate views so people would hate patron you to ask questions about her until the heat death of the universe? You got me. You figured me out. My anti-Loxana Troy grift. Yes. And there was another one there that I missed that streamed up to. Oh, I got a super chat from John Burns. Should any citizen ever donate to any political party? I know if you like your party, you get to keep your party, but corporations own both parties, so why throw any money at them at all? That's one point of view. I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, I do think there are legitimate if the party is supporting candidates that you think are important, to get elected. I mean, when you support the party, you're also supporting the candidates that the party is supporting. So if you believe in those candidates, especially if you're donating to your local party, not necessarily to the national party, but if you're donating, say, to your local Democratic Party that is putting money into local races, I think there are legitimate reasons to do that, What was the other one? Oh, Der Alte Trekkie said, how does the Electoral College work? And how do you get on said college? Does one have to have lots of money? Do you have to swear the oath of blah, 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 or have a sacrifice a goat? No, you don't have to do that. The Electoral College basically is the electors are supposed to reflect the will of the people. There are such things as faithless electors, but that usually doesn't happen. But the Electoral College is basically each state gets a number of electors equal to the number of congressional representatives assigned to the state. And those electors then vote for one presidential candidate or another based on the results of the election in that state. And then it is technically the election, the result of the Electoral College that chooses the president, not the direct popular vote. John Burns says Democrats have been complaining about the Electoral College since Andrew Jackson got shafted. In 1824, how many hundreds of years are they going to whine about it? I don't know. I wish they would do something about it. Instead of whining about it, I wish they would fix it. Like you can only whine about something for so long without fixing it until the whining starts to feel a little disingenuous. Some random geek asked earlier, do you hate the human nature argument against socialism as I do? I tend to dislike human nature arguments that seek to eliminate one particular thing just because human nature is a lot more complex than that. So yeah, I do think that's a bad argument. And also, Aungus said, how do you rate Babylon 5 versus DS9? I like DS9 a lot better. I think DS9 is a much better show. I like Babylon 5, but as I've said a couple of times, I haven't felt compelled to go back and watch Babylon 5 again since it was originally on. So even though I really liked it the first time through, it hasn't stuck with me and drawn me back to it the way Star Trek does. And Deep Space Nine, I'm rewatching it again right now. We're rewatching it on Netflix for the second or third time through. And plus all the other times throughout my life, I've watched the various episodes over and over again. So Deep Space Nine has stuck with me a lot more than Babylon 5. I do. I think it's a much better show. John Brockman says, who has the best butt in Star Trek? Patrick Stewart. Der Alte Trekkie, I read the new Star Trek books, and there Julian and Serena work together as a spy duo, and I like it. Cool. Okay, I've never read those, so I can't speak to it. But cool. If it's good, it's good. Eddie Stone, have you seen much Hitchhiker's Guide stuff over the years? It was my first sci-fi nerdery, and Douglas Adams was such a great guy, a humanist hero. Yeah, I've seen. I saw the TV series, the original, the Hitchhiker's Guide TV series. That was the 4 or 5 episode series. I have that on DVD somewhere around here actually, and I thought that was really, really great. And I saw the movie, the movie from a few years ago with Alan Rickman and Mos Def and Martin Freeman, and it was pretty good. I think the TV series was a lot better, but the movie was decent. But that's it. I haven't listened to the radio shows. I haven't read any of the books. I've just seen the TV series and the movie. But yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was really good. Some random geek, shouldn't we be out in the streets to abolish the Electoral College? We're tearing down statues of slavery. Let's end the slavery thing of the Electoral College. Well, sure. I think if people wanted to add opposition to the Electoral College to the reasons to reasons why they're doing street protests, I would support that completely for sure. But eventually we're going to have to vote on it. I mean, just going out in the streets. I mean, hopefully that motivates people to make it happen through the political process, to demand their elected representatives fix something about it. I mean, eventually we're going to have to vote on it. Der Alte Trekkie says, question, on the German newspaper Taz, an article was printed that basically said cops should be put in the garbage, although the author said it's satire. While some random geek is probably dancing naked in the street reading that, our Interior Secretary wanted to put the author on trial. People are saying, hey, freedom of speech. What do you think? Do you concur with Carl Valentin, who said satire is allowed to do everything? Or do you think, no, the line must be drawn here this far, no farther? I don't have a problem with that. I think that what you're describing sounds, I don't see why there's any need to prosecute anybody for it. I mean, cops should be put in the garbage. That's such a, that doesn't seem like an explicit threat, and it doesn't seem serious enough to cross the line into incitement, And if it is indeed, if there is a case to be made that it is actually legitimately satire, like I don't see why anybody needs to be arrested for that. That doesn't seem like the way to handle that at all. I think it's perfectly fine. Sorry, the cat opened the cat did her trick of opening the door and then closing it again. 255 AD says, I don't care about Christie. It's that I think you're being inconsistent. Like, how is she treating Biden's accusations different from how Dillahunty treated the Krause accusations? I don't know. Maybe I am being inconsistent. I don't know. Maybe I am being inconsistent because Christie is my friend and I trust her and I didn't, and, I don't know. Maybe I am. And I'm sorry if you think it's your job to force me to be more consistent. All I can say is Christy and I disagree on the Biden thing. I honestly haven't paid that much attention. I don't know what all Christy has said other than I know that she does not believe the Tara Reade accusation. So if there's something beyond that, if she has done or said something more objectionable than that, I don't know about it. And, so, and I hear about it. I hear about it mostly from you. So, if my inconsistency on this topic is indeed a fact and it is troubling to you, I apologize for that. But, I really don't know what else you want me to say. Seal0626 says, if you played the Sherlock Holmes holodeck program and didn't play as Sherlock Holmes, would he be played by Jeremy Brett? Breaks my brain that TNG was at the same time as Granada Holmes. Yeah, I never think about that, but that's true. That's true. TNG and the Granada Sherlock Holmes, they do overlap, don't they? Wow. Yeah, Jeremy Brett playing Holmes on the holodeck would be pretty cool. I could go for that. I would also love to do the Peter Cushing Holmes from the old BBC show, because I love me some Peter Cushing, and I thought he was great as Holmes on the BBC show. All the 4 episodes of it that survived that I've actually seen. And also the Hammer version, the movie of Hound of the Baskervilles. Cushing played Holmes in that and was fantastic. So I might actually go for Cushing as Holmes on the holodeck. Although Jeremy Brett would be amazing as well because he was a fantastic Holmes. Paydar Ruan says, do you think the U.S. should bring in a PR system of voting? I take that to mean proportional representation. And how do you think it would impact the political landscape? I don't know. I think it probably would. I think it probably would. Proportional representation would change a lot of things. Do I think they should? I don't know. Maybe. I haven't really thought about it. I've heard people mention it, but Serena Geek says, I honestly think Christie is being inconsistent. She believed the victims of Dick Coughlin, but doubts Joe Biden's accuser, Tara Reade. And like, as I say, I assume she has reasons for that. I assume she's looked into it and has decided that for whatever reason, she doubts the accusations. As I have said already, I don't doubt them. I assume that Tara Reade is telling the truth. If Christie has reasons for doubting those accusations, then that's Christie's business. And I disagree with her, but I trust she has her reasons. Pedro Nagira, please review Hammer horror movies. I've reviewed a few of them in the past. It's been a long time, though. It's been a while since I did video reviews of Hammer horror movies, but that would be fun to do again, because, God, I love Hammer horror movies. The Frankenstein series by itself is amazing, with Peter Cushing playing Baron Frankenstein. Oh, such great movies. Super chat from John Burns, who says, consider writing a book using holodeck technology in a society to pick its future leaders, or Will Riker thinking he's a dictator in a holodeck, leading to Quark's horrified look while observing. That might be interesting. Yeah. Peter Ruan, it would break the Dems and Republicans into their proper parties and provide a real choice. Yeah, it would presumably force something like coalition government, instead of having two sort of broad major parties, it would split off into smaller parties, and you'd have to have coalitions. Which, that would be very different for Americans, because Americans are not used to that at all. Some random geek says, because the sexual assaulter is the person that Christie wants to be in the Oval Office over Bernie Sanders, she sides with him. Well, I mean, that may be part of it, because I know Christie became disillusioned with Sanders a while back, and but again, I kind of, even though I didn't become disillusioned with Sanders, and I voted for him in my state's primary. Like, I understand her reasons for not wanting to vote for Bernie Sanders, especially coming from the perspective of someone who is a longtime Democratic Party person. Like, she resented Sanders for, as she saw it, sort of using the Democratic Party primary system to try and elevate himself when he was not a full-time member of the party, or had not been a member of the party for a very long time. So, like, that wasn't a big deal to me, but it was a big deal to Christie, and I get where she's coming from on that. And also, I mean, look, like, I think the Sanders people need to fucking cool it, because Bernie's not going to win. Like, Bernie lost and Biden won. So, like, even though I have to vote for Biden in spite of the assault allegations, because I do believe them, the fact is, it's either going to be Donald Trump or Joe Biden as the president. I think I would rather it be Biden, so I'm not going to be that mad at Christie for trying to give people reasons to vote for Biden, because I want Biden to win too. And, like, look, I would have preferred Bernie, but Bernie lost, so Bernie's over with. Like, the amount, and I'm not saying this is necessarily you, some random, because you didn't come across like that in your question, but, like, I mean, there are still people on Twitter and all over the internet who just can't fucking get over Bernie Sanders. Like, look, I wanted him to win more than Biden too, but he lost. And it wasn't close. And it wasn't because the primary was rigged, and it wasn't any of these other things. He had his shot and he lost. And I wish he had won, but he didn't. So now it's time to move on. And sitting down in the middle of the floor and folding your arms and holding your breath and saying, but I wanted Bernie, is accomplishing jack shit. Like, I'm sympathetic, but my sympathy reaches its limit. Like, all right, I get it. You wanted Bernie. Bernie didn't win. Super chat from John Gingras. Hi, Steve. No question. There's just a creepy Mr. Dingaling ice cream truck circling my block with the jingle playing over and over, and I just want to leave a record here before evil clowns get me. Well, good for you, John. We will all remember you. We will all remember you. Oh, yeah, Zhao Fang. Why is some random geek a moderator? Because we're friends and because I trust him. And I think he's a good moderator. And I expect that he would, some random geek would probably ban most people that I would ban. And that's like my only criteria for picking a moderator. I pick moderators who I know and who I trust and who I assume their standards for banning people would be relatively the same as my own. And that is the case with some random geek and with all of the people who have been made moderators. So there you have it. Super chat from Crud Butts for some Canada Dry. Oh, thank you very much. Actually, I just stocked up today at Walmart. I left there with a whole bunch of Canada Dry. So thank you very much. John Kicker says there, another super chat. Thank you. There is no John, only Zool. Oh no, we're too late. Oh my God. They were too late. 255 AD for the record, though I agree with most of the stuff SRG is saying. I'm happy to drop the stuff. Okay, well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that. Yes, I don't know. Lillian Aaronholt says, anyone noted the super chats don't appear in the stream? Yeah, I don't know why that is. The live chat viewer that I am using for some reason is not displaying super chats, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But yeah, so I'm trying to read them out as we see them, because they don't show up on that bit over there. They appear in the live chat actual window, but not on the stream. I don't know why. Robert Mill says you should see if Canada Dry will sponsor you. Yeah, I mean, I'm already. It would be the perfect sponsorship deal because I literally would not have to do anything different because I already believe in the product. I wouldn't have to do that shit that Conan O'Brien does on his podcast where he like pretends that he knows what he's what he's reading ad copy for, and it's obvious that he has no idea what the product is. Conan O'Brien, the best part of Conan O'Brien's podcast are when he reads ads. Because especially when he reads an ad for like an online service or a website or something, and he has like no idea what it even is. But he has to try and sell it. It's beautiful. Aongus, I'm mispronouncing your name, I'm sure. I apologize for that. On self-sacrifice, where does the Discovery Pike sit? I rate it higher than Spock, Sisko, etc. because he has to wait for it in an unknown future. Oh yeah, I agree. I think Pike in Discovery is right up there near the top of like self-sacrificing Star Trek heroes because he had, it wasn't just an in-the-moment thing, like Spock sacrificing himself in Star Trek 2. Like, obviously, that's a very selfless, heroic thing to do. But he was in the moment, and he had to make a split-second decision where he knew how to fix things and how to save everybody, and he knew that it would be at the cost of his own life, and he just went and did it. Pike had a chance to walk away, and he knew that his fate was certain. He saw a fate at some point in his future that was deeply upsetting to him, that was very, very traumatic to experience that vision. And he was given the choice. Tenavik gave him the choice and said, you don't have to take the crystal. And if you don't take the crystal, you can avoid this fate. But if you take the crystal, you can't escape it. And he knew he needed the crystal, and he took it. Like that to me is what elevates Pike and makes his sacrifice arguably the greatest of any Star Trek hero that we've seen so far, is that he knows, he chooses his fate. Like, he knows he's locked in now, and he still does it. Like, that's amazing. Matthew Datcher says, can a mod mute another mod? I have no idea. I don't know. I don't think so. That would be chaos, wouldn't it? That would be chaos if a mod can mute another mod. I don't know, though. Does somebody want to try it and let me know? I have no idea. Zeraxis says, Steve, what are your thoughts on single transferable vote as a system? I've heard it's mathematically excellent at representing diverse viewpoints since it allows voters to prioritize candidates. I'm not familiar with single. Have we talked about single transferable vote before? I'm not familiar with that. Is that a variation on instant runoff? Someone will have to explain it to me. I don't think I've heard of that before. Or maybe it's been explained to me and I have forgotten. I have no idea. So I apologize for that. Vlog MN, chicken nuggies or chicken tendies? I gotta go chicken tendies, I think. Because you get more. You get a larger portion of chicken there. I gotta go for that. Okay, so mods cannot mute other people. Yeah, mods cannot mute other mods. It doesn't. That makes sense. I don't think Brooklyn Bennick, did you think DS9 season 4 was the best? Oh, it's so tough to pick a best season of DS9. Season 4 was really strong. Season 4 has The Visitor, which is like the best episode ever. But I don't know. Season 5 has some good shit too. If I absolutely had to pick, it might be season 4, but I don't. But it's tough. It might also be season 5. Although season 3 is really good too. Like, it's hard to pick. It's really, really hard to pick. If you put a phaser to my head, I might say season 4, but it's tough. 255 AD says, if holosuites existed in real life, should people be allowed to use them to act out stuff like sex and murder crimes? That's tough. That's a tough question. Because, like, would that encourage people? Would it make it more likely for people to do that sort of thing in real life? Like, would it desensitize people, or would it provide people with an outlet so that they wouldn't do that in real life? It's a tough question. I don't know. I feel like that's the kind of thing you would have to do research on. But how the fuck could you research that without actually killing people, like, or endangering people? You know, I don't know. Super chat from John Burns. How do you feel about more than two parties actually having a chance of controlling the Senate, controlling the House, and winning the White House? Couldn't that help showing diverse viewpoints? Yeah, I'm actually in favor of what we call minor parties. or also sometimes called third parties. I'm in favor of empowering minor parties. I think that would be a great idea if there were more viable parties than just the Democrats and the Republicans. I think that could be a really good thing for sure, and it would definitely help with, diversifying the viewpoints of elected officials for sure. Harry Garrison, there's an unanswered super chat. There is? I think I just answered it, didn't I? It was John's, right? How do you feel about more than two parties? Yeah, that's the only other one I've seen that I haven't addressed. Vlog MN says, Pike's time crystal scene made me like his character a lot more. Although I think Discovery isn't a great Star Trek series, it's getting better. I think season 2 of Discovery, by the end of it, I was absolutely on board. Like I think I said in my review video, by the end of season 2, I said to myself, I think I love this show. It took me to that point to get there. And I think, I didn't love it at the end of season 2. At the end of season 1, I liked it, and I really liked certain things about it. But overall, I couldn't say that like I love the show. By the end of season 2, I was in love with the show. They had me completely by the end of it. There were still things about season 2 that I think didn't quite work. There were still pacing issues, and there was still the problem of, Jesus Christ, they had so many ideas, and they just didn't have enough time to do justice to all of the ideas they had. But overall, I thought season 2 was real. And the Pike thing, the Pike time crystal scene, as I've said before, destroys me every time I watch it. It destroys me every time I watch it. I've probably watched that one scene more than any other scene in Discovery, and it kills me every time I see it. It's such a powerful scene, and Anson Mount's performance is so good. Let me see. Oh, Eddie Stone, one last question before I go to sleep. Can I join the Patreon hangout if I don't turn my camera on? Yes. Yes, you can turn your camera off. Yeah, it's a Zoom call. I think I see some random geek explaining it further down in the chat. The Patreon hangouts are Zoom calls now, and yes, you can join a Zoom call and have your camera turned off. Yeah, that's no problem at all. Red Spiral Ray says, did they ever follow up with that plot thread from TNG Season 7 where the Enterprise computer kind of became self-aware and gave birth to offspring? That seemed like a huge deal. Never mentioned again. Anthony Ridgway says, I think holodecks wouldn't be much different than VR from a psychological perspective. I've murdered literally thousands of people in VR, have no desire to do so in real life. Well, good. Then if they did let people do it in the holodeck, it would be no big deal. That's good to hear. And Isaiah Taylor gets the dates for Valentina. Yeah, Valentina Tereshkova was 63. Sally Ride was 84. So it was actually 21 years in between the first woman and the first American woman. And then Mae Jemison, the first black woman, was 92. So yeah. Orion McMurray says, I've been going through your older Stephen Stuffy videos. Season 1 made me dislike your character. I see your character has grown a bit in later episodes. Yeah, a little bit. My character in Stephen Stuffy grows and shrinks as is necessary for the plot of a given episode, or it's in some cases for a given punchline. I'm willing to sort of fade my character in and out. Like when Joff the sea lion was in episodes, my character was much closer to the real me, so there could be more conflict between me and Joff. And when the story calls for conflict between my character and Stuffy, I become a lot worse of a person. Okay, STV, single transferable vote, allows candidates to be voted on via a priority system and self-correcting system. CGP Grey has a fantastic video that describes it in detail. I'll make a note and try to remember that. I'll look that up. And thank you for pointing that out. Zeraxis, the next Patreon hangout is this weekend. Is this Sunday at noon Eastern time. Deralta Trekkie says, personally, I'd love to see Kit from Knight Rider put into the computer of a Starfleet ship. The ship would be self-aware and stuff like that. Does that have potential? I would love to see a Knight Rider riff on Star Trek. You know what I mean? Like have a Starfleet ship where there is a personality of the ship that, you know, is sort of its own character, like Kit was in Knight Rider. I think that would be pretty cool. Crudbud says, anybody else go watch the Menagerie after the Time Crystal episode or pause the Pegasus to watch the Enterprise finale in the middle? I've never done either of those, but especially pausing the Enterprise finale to go watch the Pegasus, or pausing the Pegasus to go watch the Enterprise finale is pretty funny. Because then you get to see the whole epic as it was never intended. Here's another super chat from John Burns. So violence in the United States is because the lack of holosuites? Wow. Didn't a man in the southern U.S. get nailed for infanticide because someone noticed him doing Google searches about hot babies? I haven't heard that story. Jesus Christ. But yeah, apparently the lack of holosuites is the main cause of violence. Yeah. Pedro R. Noguera, any ideas for a Deep Space Nine movie? Well, it would have to have something to do with the return of Cisco, I think. You'd have to come up with a reason for Cisco to come back and what the story would be. But do I have any specific ideas? Not really. No, I haven't thought about it. You know, in a way, I'm like, because Deep Space Nine was my favorite show in the franchise, there's part of me that's like, oh, I wish they'd done a Deep Space Nine movie. But then there's another part of me that's like, no, Deep Space Nine was its own perfect little thing on TV. And like, I'm glad that they didn't try to blow it up into a feature film, because when you do a movie, especially like at the time, Star Trek was such an expansive franchise that Deep Space Nine's creators were given a little bit more leeway to kind of do what they wanted. They still weren't allowed to do everything they wanted, but they were allowed to make it into their own sort of pet project a lot more than TNG or Voyager was. And if they wanted to make a movie, like the studio would get involved. Berman, I'm sure, would have taken a much more hands-on approach. There would have been directives from, you know, above their pay grade of this is what the movie has to be. These are, you know, you have to have these aliens and it has to be this kind of a story and it has to have, you know, an action beat every 10 pages and all the fucking Hollywood horseshit. And I mean, it still could have been good because there were good TNG movies in that same era. But I don't know. I think I'm happy that Deep Space Nine was just a TV show and that it was allowed to exist largely on its own terms. You know, like I don't feel like we probably didn't miss a whole lot because there wasn't a DS9 movie. You know what I'm saying? 255 AD says, someone asked you about doing a collaboration with Linkara and or SF Debris. Both of them are socially progressive libertarians, so I don't think you get along with them. Well, it's just as well, because as I said when they asked me, like, I've not really watched any of their videos. I might have seen an SF Debris video once or twice over the years, but I don't remember. And I'm pretty sure I've never seen a Linkara video. So, like, I don't even know what we would collaborate about. Yeah, that's true. Brooklyn Bennett says it's too late for a movie without Odo. That's true. That's true. It is. And also Aaron Eisenberg as well. I mean, you could do a Deep Space Nine movie without Nog, but I mean, it would be like, it'd probably be just better not to, you know? And definitely without Odo. Like, yeah, you're right. Oh, Pedro Noguera says, what about a Kelvin timeline Deep Space Nine? How do you imagine that to be, considering what we know about the Kelvin movies? See, now that I would be interested in. If they, because look, I like the Kelvin timeline movies. I like Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond, especially Star Trek Beyond. I thought was awesome, as one of the best Star Trek movies. So if they wanted to continue that and do like the Kelvin version of The Next Generation and maybe even the Kelvin version of Deep Space Nine, I would be open to that. I don't say it would necessarily be great, but I don't say it would necessarily be terrible either. Like, I would be open to see what that would look like, for sure. John Byrne says, also, Kirk famously quotes reasons for why allowing computers in war to decide who lives and who dies made wars clean, like those in the U.S. Is involved in overseas, a big reason for lack of horrors. Well, there was the whole episode where the society didn't have actual open conflict. They just allowed the computer to simulate casualties, and then they herded people into extermination tubes, and Kirk was like, nope, I'm going to break your computer. Ha! Now you have to fight real wars. Because the idea being that actually it is no less horrible than real war. Like, people are still killing each other, whether it's clean and out of sight or not. Like, that actually kind of makes it more horrible, because you're all living with war now. Nobody even sees how bad it is. Yeah. 255AD says, privatizing the police is a thing critics of neoliberalism seriously worry about. Were you aware of that when you wrote the last Steve and Steffi season? Yeah. Privatizing the police. I didn't. Obviously, that was written before the police protests that we're currently seeing. So I mean, I wasn't predicting anything like that, but a lot of the reasons that people are protesting are not new things. Like, we've known about these problems forever. And yeah, privatization of the police and privatization of prisons, of various aspects of the criminal justice system have been a problem for a very long time. And yeah, I wanted that to be something. I wanted to be something that the mayor, that Beauregard did and will continue to do when the show comes back in the fall, to reflect something very negative about conservative politics in real life. The fact that it's not just right wingers, but it's largely right wingers that support the privatization of prisons, and would also support the privatization of police forces if that ever became like a widespread thing. I wanted to have that as an indication of how corrupt and how dangerous Beauregard is as an elected official. So yeah, that was very, very conscious that was made part of the story, and will be when the show comes back. Crudbutt's another super chat, because John Burns can't be the only one throwing down some dosh for Steve today. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Eric Allen, who's your favorite first officer? Mine is Michael Burnham. Well, yeah, I mean, Burnham, but she technically, maybe she'll be Saru's first officer in season 3, but we only got to see her as Giorgio's first officer in the pilot, and she seemed like she was good. So I won't, argue with it. But does anybody want to take a guess who my favorite first officer is? I'll give you a hint. It's this guy. It's this guy right here. He's my favorite first officer. Riker is far and away my favorite first officer. Close. I can't say close second, because I just said far and away. But second place would be Kira. I think Kira is a great character, and I think her captain first officer dynamic with Sisko is really, really interesting. So I would go with Kira for second place. But I got it. Come on, this is my man right here. Of course he's my favorite. Red Spiral Ray says, one thing about the Q that bothers me is that they can depower each other. So what's to prevent one from going nuts and wiping out all the others and then destroying the entire universe? Good question. Although, isn't it sort of implied that when a Q is depowered, that's something that all of the other Q collectively have done to one Q? Like, I don't know. Has it ever been established that a single Q can just take it upon himself to depower another Q, like, for any reason? I mean, even when the Corbin Burnson Q gives Q his powers back in the episode where he loses his powers, don't you get the impression he's kind of acting on behalf of the rest of the continuum? He's not just doing it all by himself. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Super chat from John Burns, and here I thought Major Kira would have been your favorite. Close, but nope. That's my boy right there. Come on. I love Riker. Riker's my favorite first officer for sure. And yes, some random geek. The action figure of Thomas Riker is the mini me, and that one's over here. I'll show you. So for the people who do not read my Star Trek action figure comics, we're really in the weeds here. But yes, a recurring character in the Star Trek comics that I make out of pictures of these guys is Thomas Riker, who is, as fans of The Next Generation will remember, is Will Riker's transporter duplicate, who was trapped on a planet for 7 years and then was rediscovered. And he is an exact duplicate of Will Riker. Actually, they are duplicates of each other. They were split by a transporter beam, so they both have an equal claim to being, quote unquote, the real Will Riker. And eventually, in Deep Space Nine, Thomas Riker, as the other Riker came to call himself, became a member of the Maquis and was eventually captured and arrested and sent to a Cardassian prison camp. So in my comic, I pick up about a year or so after the events of Star Trek Nemesis, and in my comic, Thomas Riker is released from the Cardassian prison camp and comes to live on the Enterprise E along with the rest of our characters, obviously no longer a member of Starfleet, and gets a job working for Guinan at 10 Forward and starts dressing like that. So there is somewhat of a resemblance, would you not say? Yes, Thomas Riker is definitely, in my comic, Thomas Riker is the mini-me. It's just another Riker action figure that I put different clothes on, and there you can see they are the same person, and they look very much like each other, and they both bear a passing resemblance to me. So yeah. My comics version of Thomas Riker is the mini-me for sure. Jordan Joan P. Yes, this is a good one. Have you seen any of the episodes of the new season of The Twilight Zone yet? I'm on the first episode, and wow. Yes, I am about halfway through. We have watched up to episode 5, I think, or maybe no, we've watched episode 6. We just watched episode 6 about half an hour or so before I started the live stream. I have really enjoyed it so far. I think this season is way more consistent. So far, I still have, there's 10 episodes, so I still have 4 episodes to go. But so far, up through episode 6, I think season 2 of the new Twilight Zone is way more consistent than the first season was. And I have really, really enjoyed it. I think it's been really, really good. Absolutely, for sure. Yes, is that a vlog? Emmett says, is that a Riker toy or a Steve Shives toy? Yes, exactly. CLO626, I hope for Tom Riker to show up in Lower Decks. That would be fun. That would be fun. Pedro Noguera says, have you ever played Star Trek tabletop games? I mean, board games and RPG. I played the... generally, for the most part, no. I don't play I don't play tabletop RPG games at all. I'm just not into it. There was a Star Trek TNG board game that came out when I was a kid. What was it called? A Klingon Challenge. It was the one with the, it came with a VHS tape. It was the VCR board game where you play the board game, but you also play the tape while you're playing the game. And, yeah. So I've played that. I played that when I was a kid. And that's basically, it's not really an RPG. It's just a board game with a VHS tape that you play. And every once in a while, Robert O'Reilly playing a Klingon that talks and looks a lot like Gowron, but isn't Gowron, pops up every once in a while and talks to you and orders you around. So I played that, but other than that, no, I'm not really a big RPG or tabletop RPG guy at all. Crudbutts, good question. Does the Thomas Riker action figure have detachable sideburns? No, he does not. That would be the ultimate feature, though, wouldn't it? If they made like a Thomas, because really, I mean, the action figure is a Will Riker action figure that I have cast as Thomas Riker for the comic. So, but if they did want to do a Thomas Riker figure, like, and have it be specifically a Tom figure, not a Will figure, that's the feature it would have to have, right? It would have to have removable sideburns. That's such a great idea. Somebody, I don't know who has the Star Trek action figure license these days, but whoever, somebody needs to get on that. Carol Kutalik, what about mobile PC MMO games? Not really. Like I've never played Star Trek Online. I'm just not a big role-playing game guy. No, in fact, in mobile games, you know, like if they have like a social feature or they have like a role-playing game aspect to it, I try to avoid that as much as possible. I think it's probably just a product of my upbringing. Like when I was coming of age, video games were something that you played either by yourself or with other people in the room with you. Like the whole social thing where you play online with people is just something I never experienced as a child, and I'm still just not that interested in doing. You know, I feel like my expectations for and the things that I enjoy from playing video games on the rare occasions that I play them were formed before the massively multiplayer online games really even existed. So like that just doesn't appeal to me. Like if I play a video game, I play either by myself or with someone who is with me physically and we're playing together. I don't know. I've just never gotten into it. Pedro says, there should be an Admiral Clancy toy that swears a lot. Oh, that would be great. It would be, they should do like Star Trek toys, like the old dolls where you pull the string and it says one of like 4 pre-recorded phrases, and they should have one of Admiral Clancy and it's just her cussing out Picard. It's just, oh, the sheer fucking hubris. That would be amazing. Brooklyn Bennett. See, I do play Star Trek Timelines from time to time. It says, I think Star Trek Timelines is fun. It's more a collect characters and go through stories. And that's what I was thinking of. I don't participate in the community at all. I haven't joined a fleet. I don't use the chat feature. Like I play just completely on my own. And I haven't played that for a while either, but I do sort of dip into it every now and then. Like I've collected a lot of characters and built up a few characters, and gone on a lot of missions and stuff. But like, I kind of go through phases where sometimes I really like it and I play it a lot, and then I just sort of ignore it for a very long time. Vlog MN says, if you watch The Simpsons, which episode is better, the Lord of the Flies episode or the Shatner Twilight Zone episode? Oh man, the Lord of the Flies episode, because it has that great ending where James Earl Jones comes in for the voiceover at the end, and he says, and so the children learned to function as a society, and eventually they were rescued by, let's say, Mo. Which is my favorite ending to any Simpsons episode ever. So I would say that. Well, see you later, Der Alta Trekkie. Thanks for stopping in again. Always nice to see you. And I think I'm going to wrap up the stream now. I've been going for 2 hours. And that's really all of me that anybody could possibly want, right? So I'm going... hang on. One more question from True55AD. I just saw it come in. When was Fulton J. Worley born, and when did he die? His voice doesn't change much in like 40 or 50 years. Well, he was always a very youthful person. He died at some point in the early 60s. The circumstances of his death are suspicious and are not exactly known. He disappeared when he went to the Vatican in 1963, following the, I think it would have been after the death of John the 23rd. He believed that he was going to be elected the next pope, and that did not happen. So he went to the Vatican and disappeared. And it is the belief of the Worley family that he was abducted by the Vatican and was kept in the catacombs beneath the Vatican and was either kept prisoner until he died or was executed secretly. But something nefarious happened to Archbishop Worley when he went to Rome to object to John the 23rd. I think what I had written in the backstory was he crashed John the 23rd's funeral and attempted to violate the corpse in some way, to desecrate the corpse of Pope John the 23rd in some way, and he was arrested and never seen again. So I don't think any of that has made it into the show yet, except for his disappearance. But yeah. He died or disappeared under disputed circumstances in the early 60s. I think in 1963 is what I had written down. And as for when was he born, probably sometime in the late 19th century. If you look up Fulton J. Worley, he was probably born in about the same year that Fulton J. Worley was born, although maybe a little later, because Fulton J. Worley did live into the 70s, I think, or Fulton J. Sheen did live into the 70s. But Fulton J. Sheen is who Fulton J. Worley is making fun of. So look him up. A couple of super chats here. Zeraxis, thank you, Zeraxis, says, even if your interest level is low, I highly recommend the Mass Effect trilogy. It's single player and has a fantastic world and characters. Duly noted. And then another one from John Burns, thank you again, says, the Democrats are all about equality, right? So why do they have super delegates? Especially since they also have the white states vote in their primaries early. Both excellent questions. I would be fine getting rid of super delegates, and I would also be fine changing the primary schedule so that it's not always the same states voting first. I agree with that completely. I think that's a big problem. All right, so now I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna take the that's the wrong thing. There we go. I'm gonna take the the live chat off the stream. So thank you all so much for the questions and for the super chats and all of that. I want to remind you, there is a link, thanks to our friend Some Random Geek, in the description of this video to a Google Doc with a series of charity links. If you can go check that out and donate to help out some of our friends there, that would be greatly appreciated. Some people who are pals of ours who need a helping hand. That would be greatly appreciated. And I also still have a link to the Black Lives Matter DC Legal Defense Fund. If you can contribute to that to help support some of the protesters in Washington, D.C., or donate to a cause or a group that is supporting protesters wherever you happen to be, or nationally, that would be great. Also, I want to remind you that in addition to the YouTube thing, I am also the co-host of a couple of podcasts as a part of the Lemmy Listen podcast family. The new episode of The Ensign's Log, our Star Trek themed comedy podcast, went up today, and it's an awesome episode, and I wish you would all listen to it, especially if you like the Star Trek stuff that I do here on YouTube. And I also co-host, along with The Ensign's Log, Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast. And both of those are co-hosted by myself and the amazing, brilliant, hilarious Jason Harding. So you can listen to both of the shows that I'm involved with and all of the other Let Me Listen podcasts by going to LetMeListenPodcast.com, or you can follow the links in the description to listen on SoundCloud or to subscribe via RSS. Whatever you want to do, check out the Let Me Listen podcast. And also, if you want to help me to continue to do what I do here on YouTube, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives. Patronage of $5 a month or higher gets you a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5 and also at the end of a Trek Actually video. But patrons of any amount from $1 on up can take advantage of a lot of the patron-only stuff on the feed, including getting to submit questions early for this live stream. Patrons of $1 and up all get to submit questions early for Ask Away, and you always get your questions answered in the first portion of the show before I start talking to the live chat. And patrons also get a chance to participate in my monthly live video hangouts with patrons, and the video hangout for the month of June will be this weekend. It'll be Sunday at noon Eastern. So check that out. It's first come, first serve. And I've been locking the meeting after we get 13 of us in there. So that's me plus a dozen. That seems like a decent amount of people, so that there's enough space that if somebody wants to get in and they haven't been in before, they haven't been in for a while, hopefully you have a chance to get in. And by the time it gets full, there aren't so many of us that it's just chaos and people trying to talk over each other all the time. So, but first come, first serve. And we go live at noon on Sunday, noon Eastern on Sunday. So I hope I can see some of you for that. And thank you all for watching this. I will be back in 2 weeks to do another one of these, and about a week and a half, I guess, to do another Facepalm 5. That's the live streams every 2 weeks. So thank you all so much for watching and for your support in whatever form it takes. Take care of each other. And have a good weekend, everybody. I'll see you on Sunday. Have a good one.